If there's one thing the N64 is known for, it's the sheer variety and also fantastic selection of 3D platforming games. Titles such as Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day shows that when it came to platformers, the N64 really had some of the most iconic games on the genre ever seen. After the sublime hit movie Toy Story, it was no surprise that a sequel to the classic was put into production. And if life as a gamer has taught us one thing, it means that a hit movie usually equals a licensed game. This time it was Activision who were quick to snap up the rights to the tie-in games, and development was left to Traveller's Tales, who are not known for their work on the console. Released in 1999, Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear To The Rescue is a game which in theory should have entered the upper heights of the N64's best, but sadly eventually leads to a mixed bag, so let's take a look. Right off the bat, it's worth pointing out that the PlayStation and N64 versions of the game are exactly the same. If you're expecting the N64 version to be superior, then you'll sadly be disappointed, as the game is a direct port of the same game released on PlayStation, and not a good port at that. Whilst playing the game, you'll get to take control of none other than Buzz Lightyear, as he embarks on his quest to save his buddy Woody from an evil toy collector. All of the well-known characters from the movie make appearances at various times in the game, and thankfully their presence flows nicely into the game, and they don't feel forced or out of place. As you play through the game's 15 levels, you'll follow the plot of the movie very closely, with a little artistic creativity put in place in order to help the game play a little better. The game is in fully 3D, and the polygon environments give you a huge area to explore. One thing that impressed me about the game is that all of the levels feel very large, and not just in the sense of size but also scale, as what would look like an ordinary house to a gamer suddenly becomes this huge structure which you'll need to use all of your tools to traverse. Speaking of tools, Buzz Lightyear comes packing some, ready to be mastered, and trust me, you'll need to do so, as there are some particularly challenging sections in the later levels. Buzz has a standard run, jump and swing, but you'll also need to learn how to shoot and grapple in order to fully explore the levels. This is important, as in order to fully complete the levels you'll need to explore every inch of terrain. During the levels you're tasked with finding tokens by completing certain tasks. The game thankfully mixes things up, and these tasks are different gameplay styles such as races and time challenges in order to keep the game feeling fresh. This only lasts so long however, as when you get past the first couple of levels you'll be starting to get annoyed by what seems like an endless quest to fetch tokens. It's nothing on the scale of Donkey Kong 64, but it soon wears thin. There are also a small number of puzzles, but thankfully these are fairly straightforward. They may pack a challenge for younger gamers, but anyone outside of the game's demographic should be able to easily figure out what to do. The biggest problem facing a lot of platformers comes in the form of the controls, and thankfully Toy Story 2 gets this department pretty much right. Buzz handles very well, and this reduces the number of cheap deaths you may encounter. It's not perfect, as there will be times when the common camera sticking issue will occur, but for the majority of the game things play pretty well. Buzz moves with the analog stick and responds well, however the control layout leaves a lot to be desired, and if you're accustomed to the Mario 64 and Banjo controls, then some of the button placements will leave you scratching your head wondering if Traveller's Tales had ever played an N64 platformer. Graphically, the game is a mixed bag. The PlayStation version of the game looks superb and has crisp looks, beautiful colours and lots of detail. The N64 version however suffers from the blurriness that can only be described as covering your screen in a thin layer of Vaseline. We've had this debate before, and I've stated that I've always preferred the softer edges and slight blurriness of the N64 graphics over the PlayStation. However, things seem to be on a different level here. Also, a big concern is the level of pop-up in the game. With the levels being so large, it's frustrating to travel through them and have huge areas suddenly pop up in front of you. Especially if it's an area you've been looking for, as you'll have to get very close even for it to come into view. With the expansion pack already on the market by this time, it can't help but imagine as to why the game didn't have expansion pack support. This could have helped the visuals, as for the most part the game's frame rate is not an issue, and everything runs smoothly despite what critics at the time said. Also torn out of the N64 version are the gorgeous full motion video cutscenes of the PlayStation game. Like many instances on the N64, the FMV has been replaced by terrible looking static images, which really brings down the overall presentation of the game. The audio in the game is average at best. The music from the movies is all present in its own slightly muffled iterations, and each of the levels has their own music tracks. The level music works well and it's suited to the stages that you're playing. However, this is a prime example of a game where a dynamic soundtrack would have worked better. With the environments being so large, it would have made sense to have had the music change as you move between areas in the game's levels. Banjo-Kazooie showed the world how to do it, and yet instead we're left with a standard but not offensive soundtrack that does little to enhance the experience. The effects on the other hand all sound the part and the characters are voiced with limited lines which usually consist of snappy one-liners. It's disappointing that Traveller's Tale seemed to turn out this N64 port very quickly without using the console's power to produce a game at least on par with the PlayStation version. It took shortcuts in the sound, graphics and control department, which sadly makes this weak in comparison to the PlayStation version. Toy Story 2 perhaps had its sights set too high in order to reach the heights that the N64 had already seen by this point, and sadly it feels it another cheap cash-in. It's not a bad platform and has some genuinely unique touches, however anyone looking for a Mario beta is sadly going to be very disappointed. But how do you remember Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue? Did you have this game as a kid? If so, let me know what you thought of it. It's always fascinating to hear people's perception of games and how they've changed over the years. As always, let's discuss the game in the comments down below, and until next time.